the other day in front of the New York Times where there was a whole gathering of people. And I'm really anxious to find out about this. It's really, if it is correct as you see it, it's the biggest story of the history of mankind, it seems to me. But bear with me, I've got a lot to learn. I'm really pleased that you're here to share that with us. And welcome. Welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure, great pleasure to welcome to the program Les Jamieson. And Les Jamieson is, bills himself as, in a certain sense, as a 9/11 activist. And he has a website here in New York. We're going to put it up at the end and so forth, but it is www.ny911truth, not ny911truth.org.
Correct.
And it's a very rich site, and we're going to be talking about people who take exception to the official report of what occurred on 9/11 here in New York City, and the movement is growing by leaps and bounds, it seems to me. And we're going to be talking about that and showing a film clip and so forth. And Les, welcome really very, very much to Conversation, to share with myself and the audience this thing you've been working on so very hard.
Thank you, thank you. And I must say that this is a part of a group effort. There are a lot of New Yorkers with me out there working on the information, the website, and the events that we hold. For instance, we have a Sunday night series at St. Mark's Church.
Coming up on the, was that the 16th, is that?
Yes, but that's a special event, actually.
Yeah, that's special, with David Griffith.
With David Griffith,
yeah,
but there's also a series that we've had since early summer, and that will continue to the end of the year. It's every Sunday night at 6:30 at St. Mark's Church, exactly, where we show films, documentaries, and have great presenters and discussion. And so this is a movement.
It is a movement. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and I just happen to be one of the workers there.
Yeah, okay, very good. It's a movement with an incredible kind of import, it seems to me, and everything. But I wonder, and we like to do, because we have 58 minutes, and I wish we could. We want to anchor this a bit on yourself. And if you could share your background, please. I understand you studied music, but could you share your own background, born and raised, education, if you would, please?
I'd be happy to. I was born actually in Panama and came here at a young age. I grew up in the Hartford area.
Were you an Army brat?
Basically, yes.
Yeah, okay,
yes,
good.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, and grew up in the Hartford area and a little country town, and left at 18 to go to college in the big city, which was Boston, and where I studied music. And,
where?
Berkeley College of Music.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Great school, yeah.
Very much enamored with jazz and contemporary music, and that was the place to be. So I spent 4 years there and got a degree in applied guitar with a minor in music arranging and composition.
Good for you. You know, do you play?
I do. I'm a guitarist.
Guitar.
And I compose on the computer and
compose on the computer.
Exactly.
Yeah, isn't it amazing what can be done now? They got a Kurzweil synthesizer. Have you ever used a Kurzweil or a Moog?
I have. I have, and there's incredible software and technology these days that just a few years ago would have taken a room this size to fit into, and now it's just software on your computer.
Do you think Mozart would have done a little better if he'd had one of these?
He would have definitely done more.
It's hard to imagine better, but
hard to imagine better or more. Sure.
And do you like classical, Mozart and that kind of thing, music,
absolutely.
as well as jazz, right?
Exactly.
Freeform or bebop or?
Bebop is where my roots are.
Yeah, Ornette Coleman lives in this building. I don't know if you know Ornette Coleman.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. He's a great fixture in the jazz scene. And jazz is an incredibly interesting array. You're really on a good course there. So how is it that you were involved in the music world, composing, that sort of thing. When and how did you become interested in this subject matter that we're specifically talking about, the 9/11, the events that happened on 9/11? How did you come to be involved in it, if you could?
Sure. Well, it really started many years ago in my youth in terms of being a child of the 60s.
Yep.
And all that social and political turmoil that existed, and becoming of age and politically aware in that time, in that environment. And the main question that stuck in my head is, why is the world the way it is? And so for my whole life, been working hard to actually come to an understanding and finding an awful lot of answers, and also finding information put out by visionaries that showed how the world could be made to work. For instance, Buckminster Fuller.
You were a fan of Fuller, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Age
He's
19,
great.
my parents had this book called Utopia or Oblivion.
Isn't it a great title, huh?
It's a phenomenal title.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it emanated from there, and then up to 9/11, the years prior to that, I was very involved in the interfaith movement. Interfaith, which is the attempt to reconcile differences between the various religions as a means to bring about peace on the planet.
Very good for you. Are you involved with a particular religious system of organizing things and so forth? Are you involved in some church activity or something?
Nothing organized, and just a student of many different faiths, and there's like I say, interdenominational or interfaith, and there's a particular book that I came across many years ago that I'm a great fan of. It's called the Urantia book. It's
Urantia, yeah, sure.
2,000-page book. It's very evolved and enlightening information, and so at that point, leading up to 9/11, that's where I was.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just working in that realm to try and benefit.
And try to be part of the peace movement.
Exactly.
Right, okay. Are you old enough to remember at all, or had become involved in the Vietnam incursion or the Vietnam War and the activities against that and the context of social conflict there was intended upon that?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I would have been drafted. The draft ended 1 month before my birthday. And so I was definitely there and very aware of the marches and the upheaval against the war.
I don't mean to pry. What year were you born?
Yeah, 53.
53, okay, yeah.
I'm sorry, 54.
54.
54, yeah.
Okay, 54.
Yeah.
But so then you were just coming of age, really, when the war was starting to rage in big-time proportions.
I guess I was 17, 18 at the time.
And were you conscious, and were you involved in the anti-Vietnam War activity, or where did you stand, or were you conscious then?
I was definitely conscious because there were marches going on in Hartford and, of course, Boston when I was there. And, of course, it was a different media environment, so it was on TV every night. And, so, sure, that was a major source of political awareness.
Yeah, that had the focus of the whole country and the whole world. And there was something really very major going on around that time. That's also when Bucky Fuller was probably recognized as perhaps the most comprehensively significant comprehensivist by comprehensivists of that time. So if one wants to understand the meaning of the zeitgeist, it would do well to understand Bucky Fuller and his perceptions. There were, of course, many others, a lot of political things and everything like that, but it was a very heady time.
Yeah, and his knowledge and his research is so necessary to be understood today. It's absolutely so relevant.
You do feel that, okay.
Yeah, because I remember one of the main points that stuck out in the book Utopia or Oblivion is that he said just by increasing the efficiency of energy and building materials, 12%, 12%, that's it, with existing technology that they had then.
Not to mention the exponentially increasing good design that's emerging with, and that was before the computer and all the IT stuff that's coming now,
Yes. So
and what about if there was that, with that, what would be the consequence of that by increasing 12%?
Yeah, by utilizing that technology, the planet would be rid of hunger and poverty, starvation, and there would not be this endless struggle for survival.
Yeah, it's interesting. He and Medard Gable, I don't know if you ran Medard Gable, and Medard Gable was younger, and he ran helped Bucky set up that World Game and the World Game where they measured population trends against technological augmentation, technological capability, energy systems and everything in a non-ideologically laden way. And Medard Gable is still around. Bucky died, I guess, in '83. Medard Gable's still around. He's got a book coming out now. It's got an interesting title, particularly off the theme that the major premise theme that Mr. Fuller came up with, that we may actually be, in this time, transcending material scarcity as an ontologic reality against which we have to measure all of our institutions in terms of the collective capability of providing life support in such a dimension with good design,
Yes.
where there were more haves than have-nots for the first time in human history, transcending scarcity, which is a staggering concept and
Yes.
might be really significant in an age when the weapons of destruction could abolish the species, a positive scenario.
Yes.
And Medard Gable has a book out, just coming out this month. It's called 7 Billion Billionaires. That we may be absolutely transcending scarcity if we could but get our act together in terms of what the system
Yes.
permits and maybe requires in order for the survival and the continuation and maybe the liberation of the whole human scenario. Big time change is the period in which we live, huh?
This is the goal, and I think this is so relevant to the topic of 9/11 activism. You know
Okay.
why? Because what it seeks to point out is that the government of the United States, being the superpower of the world, has basically been hijacked and has been suppressing this reality from coming forth, and instead consolidating power, consolidating wealth into the hands of a very few, rather than creating a planet with abundance, with technology that would have complete populations living in an enlightened and evolved state where it's not about survival anymore, it's about self-cultivation.
Right. Oh.
And
Yeah, but that concept would really stick in the craw of most, unquote, practical people who would say that is ipso facto absurd. Human nature, by its very nature, is inherently, and the struggle for survival, it's inherent that the needs and the wants are absolutely unlimited and there never can be enough. Or the idea that there can be a transcendence of scarcity is something that is just assumed and assumed in the everyday discussion, political and otherwise, as ipso facto absurd. Right?
Well, it sounds, yes, there is that, and I will acknowledge that, and I think that has to be combated and been shown to be defeatist and also disconnected with the scientific reality.
That's interesting.
That what's possible.
Uh-huh.
And then to bring about an understanding that there's another model
No.
for societies to fulfill, you know, and we have to acknowledge that and then reach for the highest of what's possible for humankind.
Yeah.
And the way we're going, folks, you know, if we continue on this trajectory, it's an ugly reality that we're heading towards in a short amount of time. So, so I think it's very important to continue to build political awareness of what's happening in terms of the power structure, the role of actions like 9/11, which was to consolidate further its power upon humanity, and then to get as aware as possible and work to combat it.
When we say its control, we're talking about, in your mind, the world power elite that runs the planet, including the political parties in this country and
Yes.
the corporate connections to the private sector world and so forth,
Yes.
that there is a view that is held and the power that is exerted by them over human institutions,
Right.
and that they are lacking vision or able to make this transformation that might be the adverse side of the possibility of a destructive scenario that their activity is leading us toward, given the injustice and the lack of realizing our full potential inherent in what they're doing.
Yes.
An ancient regime,
Yes.
in the sense of Louis XVI was out of date with his notions of feudalism. They may be out of date with their ideas of the necessity of organizing human society in such a way and can't see the vision because they're so caught up within that paradigm.
Yes, and I think because their interest is absolute power rather than a planet that works for the well-being of the total.
Well,
holistically.
yeah,
So this is, otherwise
Yeah.
we would have been living in without hunger and poverty and deprivation at this point. We would have had a beautiful society because we've had the technology for so many years.
If I may, this is a big theme. And we know now that all of humanity is of a gene pool coming out of Africa 200,000 years ago, and we've been living in a world where for most of that time we were prey of animals, and then we created technologies and so forth. And the idea that we're transcending a situation where collectively the whole system, including knowledge and knowing and things like that, that we've been living in a situation where the assumption that there is not nearly enough, given our technological capability of augmenting the process and understanding it, has been a reality throughout 200,000 years of human society. The political systems that were developed for one power group to fight against another, nation state, that kind of thing, was apropos and appropriate to a reality that has changed within your lifetime?
Up to the discoveries of Buckminster Fuller.
Well, okay, or others. Not only Fuller, but others who have taken a
Nikola
broad...
Tesla and others, exactly.
Yeah.
But up to that period of time, the early 1900s, it was so that in order for one class of people to live in
acquire
abundance
capital,
and acquire capital, it had to be at the expense
of the other. It was zero sum.
Exactly.
There was only so
but
much.
This has all changed, like I said, in the last 80 years or so.
Well, I would say Fuller put the date where we crossed the 50% mark around 1970. About the same time, the weapons that developed are such that if they were to be unleashed would mean the end of the species. Okay. That the percentage that the world population, with all of its trendings and glowing, coming out of World Game, that we were increasing on the number of people who could be seen to be haves. You have to get a definition of what we mean by that, short of everybody has to swim in a swimming pool full of diamonds in order to be a have, or a lot of absurdist things.
Sure.
But that we crossed that line where the technology was evolving so quickly and exponentially to where there were more haves than have-nots in terms of our capability, not the reality, but the capability, design capability of making the planet work for everyone. So it's within our lifetime.
Absolutely.
If that is the case, and of course that's not realized, Benny, because all of the institutions we've inherited were built within a historical context that has been changed by the ontologic or by the technologically augmented design capability inherent in the condition in which we find ourselves now. Big question.
Possibly, yeah.
Possible.
I mean, also we have to take into account the history of the U.S. Politically, how it began, and then over the, in terms of the philosophy and the political concept of democracy, being that we must have a government that is by the people, of and by and for the people, and that the right to happiness is guaranteed, so on and so forth. And then by the 1950s, I'm sorry, the 1850s, corporations were already starting to overtake government's abilities and powers to protect those rights and those inalienable rights for people. So the corporate structure had already started, and also the banking and financial interests had already started to basically infiltrate and sink roots into our governmental system at that point. So where we are now is a direct result of what has happened back to the beginning of this country, that gradually and incrementally has continued to increase its power over our governance.
Yeah. What a blessed continent this was. We had resource bases that were unbelievable by people out of history. A virgin continent with the best soils that existed. You could just put seed in the ground and it would come up. We had iron ore, we had coal, we had oil, we had everything. And it was amazingly blessed, an open continent. It's no wonder that we made a good deal of material progress.
Right. It also was in synchronicity with the Industrial Revolution.
That's right.
So all the new science and technology and manufacturing capability. And then this, I guess, profit motive from the Europeans that were coming in. It definitely engendered a whole period of massive accumulation of wealth.
Yeah, we had the robber barons at the turn of the century, in
Right.
19th century, and they did that. And Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations the same year the steam engine was invented, 1776.
Right, right.
And then there came to be a notion of democracy out of America, which was a bunkin country across from the dynastic states in Europe. And they said the people should have something to say with them. The people have never had anything to say about anything throughout all of history. In ancient Rome, it was the emperors and the leaders, and the people were essentially slaves. In the feudal period, serfs were wallowing around in the mud of poverty, and they were beaten down with power, exerted and able to be exerted over the people. That's what power is, in a sense, rather than having a world where the people were, by their own self-existence, empowered to be able to lead their own life. That may be the promise of the time in which we find ourselves. And many people who are all wrapped up with the idea of power, the ability to make other people do what those people that have the power require them to do by law or by economic dominance, is something that people are not going to give up lightly, I would think.
Absolutely. I would agree. They're not going to give that up lightly, and it's only going to come about by citizens coming to a full realization of their role and their rights and their responsibilities as a sovereign citizen, and their duties to take on the strings of their own governance, basically, and become the government, which is the way it's supposed to be.
Maybe the promise of the time in which we live.
Let's
much
hope,
to be feared by people who are in positions of power for the established power systems in the world.
True, although it's an interesting thing is the vision that can be fulfilled by having truly responsible government, truly responsible citizenry, I think can only be to the benefit of all, except for the few who want to dominate and want to control all the wealth for their own agenda.
Right, and also people who are driven with the sense that they have the inborn right. Like the aristos in European feudal times, they felt they had the right to order these people, because it had been like that for 700 years. That was in place, and that was the system by which people... And they called that regime, those dynastic states in Europe, ancient regime, ancient regimes that are in place by which people got a sense of identity. We have the same thing in the modern era. We have the industrialists, the financial people have assumed the role of the feudal lords. They have control and ownership of the assets and so on, and they assume that they have the right to run the world, as it were, in terms of their aristocratic idea of and a power to exert the ability to exert power over the masses, and that may be that very system itself may be in question, as the technology could be liberating of one and all within a context that is truly liberating in the fullest sense of the word. And that's part of the promise, I guess, against which Mr. Fuller and you and I and others have been trying to herald that great awakening.
Yes.
That's some background toward this 9/11 stuff, perhaps.
I'd say so, because 9/11 occurred within this structure that we're describing, which is basically a modern-day feudal structure.
Thank you.
And in a modern-day political structure where you have the government that is so powerful and a populace that is so basically detached, disconnected from its history, disconnected from its knowledge of what democracy really is in terms of their own role and how they fit into it. I like to say that democracy is
somnamblistic.
I like to say that democracy is not a spectator sport. It's a participatory reality. And so what we're finding, though, is the way it's been is people have abdicated their power and their responsibility. And so here we are with an economy that is basically crumbling before us in so many ways. I know they say that it's getting better. They say that, I don't know, production is up. You listen to the news and I don't know, they say jobs are increasing, and but they don't tell you that it's more like
flipping
the type
burgers.
of jobs are, flipping burgers, right? And low paying. So this is the reality that we find ourselves in, and this is the reality that events like 9/11 occurred. And I think understand it, the best way possible is to see it in a historical context.
Okay.
Whereas,
Yeah, we got to get on to the 9/11. When we talk a lot of philosophy, we better
Right.
get on to the sub and substance of your. We're going
Right.
to show a clip and so forth.
Exactly.
And the actual movement, this 9/11 truth
Exactly.
movement,
Yes.
is a very important one. It's getting a lot of legs around the world, as
Yes.
even as monumental the assumption is. And maybe we could get on to that because
Sure.
we've got a clip we want to show and so forth.
Sure.
What is the 9/11 truth about?
it is a movement that questions the official story on 9/11.
Okay.
Okay, and that has put together actually an incredible amount of research on things such as the fact that it's unprecedented for 4 planes to be able to be hijacked without air defense responding.
No. NORAD stepped down or something? There was
NORAD did not respond the way it should have and the way it did in the prior year, 67 times, right by protocol. So this is just one aspect of the evidence. So let me give another 2 or 3 pieces of evidence here. There were put options that were betting on the collapse of those stocks of United Airlines, American Airlines, and a few of the insurance companies that would have been affected by these attacks. This insider trading absolutely proved that there was foreknowledge.
Okay.
And let me give a couple more.
No, wait, you're talking for prior knowledge by people in positions of responsibility for the American governmental and business sector knew that that attack was going to happen. Did they help make it happen? Did they let it happen with that knowledge? What are the implications of the distinction? And what are the truths that are emerging? Because the charge is huge in its implications.
Yes. Well, when you include the evidence such as there were war games, meaning military exercises, at least 5 of them happening that morning. One was Vigilant Warrior, another one Vigilant Guardian, another one Tripod 2. When you include these, you see that there was absolutely an orchestrated event happening that morning to clutter the skies, to clutter the FAA radar, so that these hijackings could have happened camouflaged by these exercises. That's one. And there's so many things I would say the best thing to do for people is get a book by Dr. David Ray Griffin called The New Pearl Harbor. The New Pearl Harbor,
and he's the gentleman who's going to be here in New York soon after this program airs.
Exactly.
Let's let him know about that, and we'll put it up at the end. But
sure. Okay, very good. He'll be here this Saturday, October 15th, 1 p.m. at the Anthology Film Archives.
Right, Mika's.
32 2nd Avenue, 1 p.m. And then on Sunday...
32 2nd Avenue, that's at 2nd Street.
Correct.
Right,
2nd
right.
Street, sure.
Down on the Lower East Side.
Lower East Side.
Great place, great place.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Jonas Mika's got that going,
And just a little ways up on 2nd Avenue, for Sunday, we'll be at St. Mark's Church, 6:30 p.m., and that's at 10th Street and 2nd Avenue. So he's going to be giving a very special presentation that he wrote just for the New York audience.
Very good. And he's a very serious theologian and a scholar.
Absolutely.
And the thing that he put on C-SPAN that got all over the nation when he gave a talk at Madison has had huge ramifications where the idea where some people would want to ascribe to the lunatic fringe or the crazies or something, it's beginning to be picked up by scholars and by serious people who are questioning the context of that.
Yes, which is very important to state here, that there are people like him, Gore Vidal, let's see, Ralph Nader, David Cobb, presidential candidate for the Green Party, Michael Bednarik, actor Ed Asner, then people within the administration or former political officials, Morgan Reynolds, who's in the Labor Department, Catherine Austin Fitz, who's in the Housing and Urban Development Department, and just to name a few.
Yeah, now if we could, what are we talking about, because we spoke about this earlier, when we say that, what are the parameters of the assumption? There could be people who, there was an official report was brought out, and that sort of thing. And then there were people who take exceptions to that official report,
Right.
but that could be saying that it was 607 rather than 803. It could be a minor thing
Yes.
in that, but the major premise
Yes.
would be more or less accepted, that we had 19 people take these airplanes and crash them into the buildings unbeknownst to everyone.
Yes, yes.
So when you name those names, I know a great name who is Noam Chomsky on the left has refused to say that he thinks the idea that the government or the system in the United States was consciously evolved either to let or make that attack happen in order to engender fear and build a context of fear by which fascist takeover of the government could be achieved, much like Hitler burned the Reichstag in 1933.
Yeah.
He will not sign on to that because he said it is totally absurd to think that they could ever get away with that. It would certainly come out.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about when people
Well,
say they object to the 9/11 report? It can be
Right.
done on simple detail matters or upon the major premise. And
Well,
what is the major premise that you or some of the more outspoken people are making?
Sure. First about Noam Chomsky, I'm told that he also refuted the fact that there was a conspiracy that killed JFK. In other words, he bought into the Warren Commission.
Right.
Even though there was a Zapruder film that obviously contradicted the Warren Commission's outcome.
I think there are probably a lot of people who
so-
accepted the Warren Commission, and then you've got people
So-
who are conspiracy, grassy knoll people, and a lot of the society in general accept the major premise of the Warren Commission report on the assassination of John Kennedy.
What happened, I was just told by a very ardent researcher that goes back a lot of years, Frank Morales, is saying that early on they called these people who questioned the Warren Commission researchers. Then all of a sudden they started to call them conspiracy theorists.
Right.
So this is basically a way of marginalizing.
Yes, of course.
And making people who question anything coming from the government into seeming fringe and basically crazy.
Yeah. And
However, we're not conspiracy theorists. You know what we are?
Well, I want to make it clear.
We're
that
detectives.
detectives. All right.
You know, you just
Oliver Stone made a movie about JFK. He said that Lyndon Johnson was involved in the assassination to gain power. That's what came out of the film. A lot of people think that's absurd, you see? And
Well,
by
that's a
stressing it so far, there may have been something, or there's a mix-up, or there's sometimes bureaucratic company. We just had a big thing at Katrina. Some people say it's because they wanted to destroy a lot of black faces, you know, because they're evil.
Right.
They got that kind of a thing. Conspiracy people get it.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And let's go to the various premises that are inherent in this 9/11 truth movement. Let's go to the most extreme. The United States government, the executive branch and the business establishment were complicit or were guilty of engineering that event in order to make a new Pearl Harbor attack on this country, in order to engender in the people fear and hatred so that they could seize power in a fascist takeover, and that is a major contention, that is a major premise contention of some of the people in this 9/11 truth. Is that the contention of Mr. Griffiths, or where does he stand?
Sure.
Or,
That's.
and how do we differentiate the people who are really serious from the people who are way out beyond the fringe of what makes sense because they're all imbued with a political hatred that goes beyond all bounds of rationality?
Okay. It's a very, very detailed question, okay. Now, how we can first look at this is that 9/11, when you just add up the official story, on its face, doesn't add up, doesn't bear up to scrutiny. For instance, it's impossible that some guys with box cutters can hijack 4 planes simultaneously and fly them for over an hour and a half without being intercepted.
With no NORAD, no scrambling.
And supposedly one hits the Pentagon and there's no anti-aircraft missiles when they knew it was coming for at least 45 minutes. So you got to really look at what you're being told here and use some real just basic common sense. And that's just one part. For instance, then after the collapse of the towers, which we're going to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, and we got a clip. We want to make sure we get it in. We only got an hour.
We're going to show the clip. So several days later, supposedly a passport of one of the hijackers was found in pristine quality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, very...
Among the rubble?
Yeah, among the rubble, right? Everything was blown to smithereens, but they found a passport.
It could have been planted, in your estimation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been known to happen. Governments have done
absolutely,
that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
let's talk about the collapse of the towers.
All right.
And then we'll show the clip.
Number 7 or
well, all the 3 of them, basically, the way they fell, they were built to withstand the impact of a Boeing, I think it was, oh gosh, I remember, I forget the model number, but it was a passenger jet. It was also built to withstand wind of 150 miles an hour, 160 miles an hour. Hurricane
5,
winds. So then what happened? It had some fires that were literally cooling down because you could see from turning from gray to black.
Yeah.
They were contained in a small area, and then all of a sudden you see the South Tower, who was hit second, collapsed. The speed of gravity in its
8 seconds or something. Or the 7 came down in 8 seconds.
That was about 10 seconds. The speed of gravity in a total free fall on itself. No resistance whatsoever.
And they got these puffs of snow coming out like when they pull a building, as they say, demolition.
Right, ejections coming out in the lower floors. And you can see this. It's very clear. If you go to a website called WTC7.net, you'll see some of these films. And they're available in the public. And then 7, Building 7, we're going to see a clip on that. We'll get that ready now. And this is about a 5-minute overview of what happened to Building 7. I don't have to say anything more.
We might just say you have a DVD, and it's also you have a very rich site. And I want to give them again. We're going to put it at the end, but it's www.newyork911truth.org.
ny911truth.org.
ny911truth.org, and you've got a clip from that, and we're going to set that up and run it now. And I'm sorry we're running short on time. There's so much we could talk about. But we're talking with Les Jamieson, and he's a 9/11 activist. So maybe if we can set that up and run that tape. Now, it goes about 5 minutes or so.
About 5 minutes.
And let's run that and make sure we get it in. Okay, thank you. Run that now then, please.
Standing at a location that has come to be known widely across the world simply as Ground Zero. Right behind me is where the Twin Towers had once stood. And currently the area is under renovation in what will become in part a memorial to the some 3,000 victims from over 80 different countries who were murdered on September 11th, 2001. Many of us will never forget the images that were broadcast on that tragic day. But largely and widely unknown across the world is the fact that a third building also went down on the morning of September 11th. World Trade Center 7 stood 100 yards across from Towers 1 and 2, clear across an entire city block. We see now that World Trade Center 7 is currently under reconstruction, and the new building stands 40 stories tall. In the early afternoon of September 11th, fires broke out in World Trade Center 7. And when we look at the photographs and video available from that day, we see the fires are mostly on the lower floors, and they're largely contained and actually very small. Regardless, at 5:25 p.m., about 7 hours after the first 2 buildings went down, World Trade Center 7 implodes. And it implodes in a free fall. That's about the speed of gravity. And it does so into its own footprint. And when World Trade Center 7 comes down, it does not damage either of the buildings significantly on either side of it. Now, if you were to ask a structural engineer or a demolition expert about World Trade Center 7, with the facts that have just been presented to you, they would likely not call it a collapse. They would likely call it a work of art. World Trade Center 7 was a controlled demolition. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, conducted an investigation into what caused the towers to fall. It concluded that whatever it was that caused World Trade Center 7 to come down, it remains unknown. Fire Engineering Magazine, the 125-year-old paper of record amongst the fire engineering community, came out in January of 2004 and called FEMA's investigation a half-baked farce working on a shoestring budget. Now, the question you should be asking yourself is why? Why did World Trade Center 7 need to be taken down in a controlled demolition? Well, when we look closely at the tenants in the office spaces in World Trade Center 7, effectively 7 was a military building. The CIA had a clandestine bunker on the 23rd floor of World Trade Center 7. Secret Service had offices in World Trade Center 7. Rudolph Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management was located in World Trade Center 7, which would have been the perfect center to respond to an emergency such as 9/11, except that the tragedy caused them to evacuate the bunker at 9:25 a.m. in the morning. Additionally, the Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC, had offices in World Trade Center 7. Now, this was late 2001. This was at the height of the investigation into Enron. So the majority of Enron's SEC filings were likely destroyed when World Trade Center 7 came down. Now, in September of 2002, PBS aired a documentary titled America Rebuilds. And in this documentary, Larry Silverstein was interviewed. Larry Silverstein leased the World Trade Center complex just a few months before 9/11 occurred. And in this documentary, Silverstein is seen making a shocking commentary in which it appears he himself states World Trade Center 7 was a controlled demolition.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Now, the term pull, which you just saw Larry Silverstein use, is an industry term that means to demolish, a controlled demolition. What did Larry Silverstein exactly say here? Did he say World Trade Center 7 was a controlled demolition? If so, is it conceivable that through all the melee and hysteria that was going on the morning of September 11th, a demolition crew could have came in and taken down World Trade Center 7 within 7 hours? Most controlled demolitions take up to 2 weeks in intense planning to make happen. If this is the case, the only explanation that makes sense is that a controlled demolition was planned way in advance of September 11th, 2001.
Incredible. I mean, that's incredible, and that's a piece of evidence that I wonder if we could maybe see. We got about 15 minutes left, okay? Right. We want to get a clip in that announces Mr. Griffith's coming on the weekend, because he is a really respected authority and everything.
Yes.
Back again to the major premise. It isn't. It's hard for people to believe. Just we had Katrina, we had a lot of bungling. It was just bungling, that kind of thing. But it wasn't a conscious effort.
Oh yes,
there are people like
there were reports. There was one on Tim Russert, Meet the Press, of the president from the parish, I forget which parish, when he said that FEMA literally cut their communications lines.
Yeah.
Delivered. There were many reports where FEMA turning back truckloads of water, of food, and so on and so forth. They were preventing boats from coming in.
Okay, yeah.
So
but
there's much more to it.
Yeah, right.
And that's bungling.
There's a real upset. Some people are going to try, and Democrats are going to try and say it's a bungling, incompetent, the war in Iraq is incompetent. But the premise, the major premise is being made by some of you people of the 9/11 Truth Movement is it wasn't just bureaucratic bungling.
Sure.
It was a conscious participation on the part of the people who run this country, and that they pulled the building, that they did it, and they did it in order to engender fear or whatever. Sure. Could you address that as a now that would be outside the possibility of any comprehension to where even Mr. Chomsky doesn't buy into that because he said they know they would be caught. But address it at that level, which is the most outlandishly conspiratorial, and the implications are the most outstanding.
Okay, what we have to do, regardless of how far-fetched, how horrifying it seems that our government was complicit in orchestrating this, we have to just look at the evidence objectively and impartially. And what we just saw in this clip was a demolition, and what we saw was an admission by the owner, Larry Silverstein, that it was pulled. This is industry jargon for a demolition.
Well, I've heard people say it looked like it was pulled, and buildings have been pulled, but a building like that has never come down. A steel-enforced building like that has never come down in the history of the universe.
Including one that burned for 19 hours in Philadelphia. It's called the Meridian Plaza.
Yeah.
These buildings were just a few hours. It was the first, less than a few hours in terms of Tower 1 and 2. And then Tower 7, which we just saw, was not hit by any plane, yet it fell on in its own footprint, the speed of gravity, like a deck of cards here, and 7 hours later, and we saw the evidence there that this was not due to fire, this is not due to any plane.
One thing we know, the buildings came down.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they came down.
Yeah.
Now, the most people would accept in terms of there being, there's a thing that says, let it happen, made it happen.
Right.
There's that kind of thing.
Right.
And the thing is that, like some people claim, Franklin Roosevelt knew they were going to bomb Pearl Harbor.
That's
he wanted to do it as
it's a big red herring, you know, because furthermore, if they just let it happen, it's still treason.
Well, okay.
And it's still a crime against humanity.
It's political manipulation of conscience. Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get in the war. He had to have something happen in order, because he knew the political reality is the people didn't want to go in the war. They had to go in the war. They didn't know it. They were the leader. The people are behind. We got to lead them by manipulating. Right. But it's a political gamble that lets something happen in order to gain political. That happens in the political practice. That can be understood in the normal consciousness.
What we just saw was not, you know, just incompetence. This was willful orchestration. And there's much more evidence. You got to study the war games. You got to study things like the put options. You got to study the fact that the debris that was in the scene of a crime was removed within a few weeks. The steel girders were removed and shipped to China and melted down. That in itself is a criminal offense because they were not forensically tested. What else? The foreknowledge. I mean, there was a multitude of warnings that took place over many years, and right now, in the last 3 weeks, look up Able Danger in a Google search, and you'll see that there was this surveillance program.
Able, A-B-E-L?
A-B-L-E.
Oh, A-B-L-E, yeah,
Able Danger, that proved that 4 of these alleged hijackers were being tracked, but were protected, going back as early as 1999, and this is coming from 2 naval officers and a Republican senator, representative, I'm not sure which, Kurt Weldon, who got this information and put this forth saying, hey, what's going on here? The 9/11 Commission didn't even include this information. Why? What's going on? And then they denied it. So speaking of the 9/11 Commission, here's another way of knowing that this was orchestrated. And Dr. Griffin, who's going to be here this Saturday and Sunday.
Say it again. He's going to be talking at the film anthology and
he wrote I will.
Yeah.
He wrote a second book called The 9/11 Commission Report, Omissions and Distortions, in which he pinpointed 115 lies, errors, and omissions in the 9/11 Commission Report. And this is on our website, which is ny911truth.org.
And he is a reputable scholar and so
he's
forth.
He's written over 30 books. He's one of 60 prominent theologians.
He's a theologian,
that are listed.
Now, again, somebody could take the Bible and say that, you know, there are errors, there are errors, there are errors, there are errors. But the thing that gets to me is that there are errors. Somebody didn't include this, they didn't include that. They could have, you know, that kind of thing. History is a great big seamless web, and people take exception to it. But again, what I want to get to is the basic premise. Are there some people who say it was just a gang that couldn't shoot straight, a bunch of errors and so forth? They let it happen because they were incompetent? Are there a lot of people who accept that? Most people will accept that it was most people in the American and world society would say it was a bunch of guys who evaded the thing in some sort of miraculous kind of guns of Navarone, pulled off a great thing that could never happen. They pulled it off and it happened, and that's that. That's what they accept. Then there are going to be some people who say, well, they were incompetent. They didn't follow through. They were bungling. There was a Keystone Cop. But the one I want to get to is the conspiracy that says there was conscious knowledge and involvement. Is there any evidence, or do you think that there is evidence that leads to that? And why would that happen? And what are the implications of it if it did, if they were actively involved in pulling this off, and for why would they do that?
There's a ton of evidence. Read Dr. Griffin's book called The New Pearl Harbor. It just lays it right out. We don't have time to go detail by detail.
They can go to your site.
Also on our website, there's a simplification. There's a slideshow. If you go out on the left side, you'll see a simplification of 9/11. And it just goes bit by bit. It shows all the categories of analysis. There's like 15 categories and 35 or so subcategories. And you just see these. You put them all together, and it becomes absolutely clear. The puzzle, you know, takes shape, and you see that there's no way that 9/11 happened the way they told us.
Okay, what are the
website, by the way, again, 911
Oh, yeah.
ny911truth.org.
Okay, other great truths. There was the burning of the Reichstag. I'm not even sure if that was actually the fullness of time was proven to be the case. I don't know. Hitler burned it to get at the Jews and the Nazis, a hate thing going against them.
He used it
but
to
why
invade
would the people,
Russia.
why would the established people do and be involved themselves in that? As Mr. Chomsky says, it's obvious that something like that could never be covered up. It would come out in the fullness or even the shortness of time.
Well, according to their calculations, they could not ever come up because they control media, they control the whole thought structure of what gets out there. There's been a mountain of evidence proving their complicity for a number of years now, and yet you don't see this in the news. And if anything, it's marginalized to make it look like a conspiracy.
Yeah, sure, right.
Exactly. So of course, they know, and they believe, I should say, that they create reality. They've actually said this.
To a degree, it's true.
Okay.
The history is written by the powerful winners of world, social, economic, political confrontations.
Right.
Yeah, they write the stories.
They write the stories.
And it still is the case.
In the whole framework for how reality is perceived. And let's say who they are. The Project for a New American Century, which are the neoconservatives, which are considered by many, even conservatives, to be not purist conservatives, but radicals, okay?
Yeah.
And what they said in the document called Rebuilding Our National Defenses is that in order to create dominant supremacy and to control the world's natural resources, it would require a transformation, a military transformation, but the only way the American people would support it would be with a catastrophic or catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor.
And that they have a vision that should be brought to all the world. It's a mission that they have, and Napoleon felt that when he took over, and that's a thing a lot of people have.
Total domination.
But it's not just the neocons, it would be the whole political system, are you insinuating? Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberger Group, the Illuminati, all of the people that have been part of seen as a conspiracy of people to run the system in their old way, whose time has passed, and there's need for a major change.
Yes,
is that the theme and the premise? Because if what you're saying is proven to be true, it is going to be absolutely devastating to all of our institutions.
Oh, it could be not devastating, but a wake-up call. It could be an opportunity to finally see, once they put together the pattern of events that have happened, like especially since the World War II and the creation of the national security state and the secret government, and then the emergence of the Council of Foreign Relations and, of course, the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderberg Group. When they put these together and see what has been happening, like after 9/11, first of all, okay, these attacks which just cannot be explained by the official government story, then they see the Patriot Act pushed through within 6 weeks without any congressperson reading it, and they see the Homeland Security, talk about fascistic, and these realities, when they see the undermining the economy, all the fascist characters.
They would say this is a necessary, the enemy's at the gate, we've got a war with civilization, the enemy at the gate, we have to pull together, we have to come under our authority, people will flock to authority, and that's what a context for taking over in a fascistic way the world. And that's a premise that's being made, and it's a huge premise. And one of the real big problems is we just don't have enough time. There's so much to go into. One and all are recommended to want to pursue this, to go to your site again. I'm going to say it right now. That's New York 911truth.org.
Actually, it's NY for New York, 911truth.org. And I'd like to remind people that this Saturday, we have David Ray Griffin, theologian, who's going to be giving a talk on the demolition, or I'm sorry, the destruction of the World Trade Centers. A theologian speaks out. That's the name of his talk. A theologian
of great authority. Okay, so, and we have a little clip that is on DVD, and we're going to show that. Let's show that now, because we only got a minute or so left. Go ahead.
Also, you can call our phone number, which is 212.
and the number's on the clip.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if we can't run that clip now then, please. We're only coming to the end.
The attacks of 9/11 changed the world forever. Related events continue to dominate the news. So join us for a special New York presentation entitled The Destruction of the World Trade Center, A Christian Theologian Speaks Out, with David Ray Griffin, author of 2 books on 9/11. On Saturday, October 15th at 1 p.m., he'll be at the Anthology Film Archives, 32 2nd Avenue, corner of 2nd Street. On Sunday, October 16th at 6:30 p.m., he'll be at St. Mark's Church, 2nd Avenue and 10th Street. For details, call 212-714-7147 or visit www.ny911truth.org. That's 212-714-7147 or visit www.ny911truth.org. Only truth can bring justice and progress. Understanding 9/11 is required.
There's the information for him.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say? We've got about a minute and a half left, and we're going
Yes,
to be running
yes.
our graphics soon, but yeah.
Yes, thanks. I would like to encourage people to look up Operation Northwoods.
Northwoods.
Northwoods, yes, Operation Northwoods. This was a plan in 1962 to create a terrorist incident in Florida and blame it on Cuba for the
camera ought to be on you, I think.
for the pretext of invading Cuba and taking out Castro.
Yeah.
Operation Northwoods. And this was recently declassified information. And what it does, it gives us historical precedent to see how an event like 9/11 could be orchestrated, because plans like this existed previously. This is 1962.
There have been things like this that are machinations by political people throughout history, but this one that you're contemplating here and thinking, and the movement seems to be growing, it doesn't appear ever in any of the established media. I mean, the networks and so forth. This is beyond the pale of anything they could discuss. Do you think it could work its way? We're in access, so there's a lot of things that are said. Perhaps it's good. The Hyde Park Corner notion, people say things that seem outlandish. But do you think there could be some attention to where people in the established and over-the-top media might be able to start picking up on this story?
Yes.
We only got about a minute left or less.
Yes. I think the established media can see, with stories like Able Danger, and also stories such as last week's news about Porter Goss, CIA director, refusing to investigate certain agents within the CIA that had foreknowledge or had some information that they could have used to stop 9/11. So there is news coming out. There's an awful lot of it, but you got
to get after it.
The media just has to have the courage and the foresight and the vision to see what's best for this country.
And that's what you're trying to get them to do.
Exactly.
As well as society
to be
at large.
responsible.
Thank you for talking, and
Yes.
it's a big theme, and we thank you very much for viewing. We invite you, and we'll come back again tomorrow. Thanks a lot, Les, for coming in.
Thank you, Harold.
See you tomorrow.